Welcome to Coastal Front. Join us each week as we sit down with the movers and shakers of Vancouver to discuss stories of business, politics, accomplishment, and failure. Our aim is to keep you dialed into what matters most in our city. Now, here's your host, Andrew Johns.
Okay, Kathleen Dixon, thanks for making your way down here on such short notice.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
We have Kathleen Dixon. You are the Conservative Party candidate for Vancouver Quadra.
Yep.
Which is the neighborhood that Ross and I live in. So you're going to have to give us your best sales pitch as well as all the listeners on the show. This is your first entry into politics, I understand. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This journey really started in April.
Did it? Okay.
Standing in the back of a pickup truck, introducing Andrew Scheer at a Jason Kenny rally in Calgary in the middle of a blizzard. And so, CTV has a clip of that. And it made me realize that I needed to do more to try to bring a return to reason in Ottawa.
Okay.
And I've, it was kind of a turning point for me and really needed to step up. And I think we all probably reached that point in our life. And fortunately, I had the backing of my partner and my family. And they said, yeah, Mom, go do this. Yeah.
Wow,
the only person that was a little upset was the dog.
Yeah.
But now that she's found Spanish banks, she's super happy.
Oh, wow, that's really a neat story.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were living in Calgary, were you?
I have really had a foot in both camps for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm a UBC geology graduate.
Okay.
And after that time, I worked in the mining industry. And so I was here in Vancouver.
Yeah.
I did a business degree overseas. And when I came back, I took a junior mining company public.
Oh, really?
And using Wright, here in Vancouver. So I was in and out of all these big towers.
Yeah.
And when that kind of ended, the mining industry took a turn.
Yeah.
And certainly my family situation changed. I had some little kids.
Yeah.
So I stopped working in the field and, spending time in helicopters and fly camps and, out in mining camps. So I switched to the oil patch.
Okay.
And, I could have a regular schedule then, and I could come home in the evenings and spend time with my kids. And, the geology isn't nearly as exciting as mineral exploration, but it's really steady. And I've worked, oil and gas plays as well as oil sands. So I'm quite familiar with what goes on there.
Yeah.
And
that's fascinating. I've never actually met anybody who's a geologist and has worked in both, because myself having my work in the capital markets business and, at this firm where we are exposed to lots of people in both the oil and gas and mining space, but I've never met anybody who's worked in both camps. That's really interesting.
Well, I think it helped, all my mining background really helped to get the job working in oil sands because I understand how an open pit mine worked.
Right.
And so I worked for Canadian Natural Resources, and really the last 10 years of my career, I have worked in investment banking as well.
Okay.
And I do mergers and acquisitions for one of the big top banks.
Yeah.
And I have oil and gas resources as well as mining deals come across my desk, and I get to help on the technical aspects and try to bring together all the related parties that have that technical expertise. So
right.
wow.
Super
really interesting stuff.
That is. So let's go back to April. You're on the back of a truck introducing Jason Kenny.
Yeah.
Take me there for a minute.
Well, at that point,
how did that happen?
I got involved. I got involved in the Kenny campaign, trying to get women on board to meet him and to see his attributes. His reputation amongst women, he's not well liked, and I'd seen him at a number of luncheons and events, and I thought he was very pragmatic and could right the ship. That Rachel Notley had sort of set on a course.
Yeah.
So once he was voted in, I realized really the job was half done. So I was talking with my dad, who lives out in Point Grey as well, and some other friends that live in Quadra.
Yeah.
And they were like, yes, come and talk to the people, see if this is what you want.
Yeah.
And so I put my name forward and I filled out all the paperwork for the nomination process.
Yeah.
And was acclaimed at the end of June.
Really?
As your candidate.
Wow.
Yeah. So because my dad lives out here, and because of the work I've been doing at the bank, I really feel like I have a foot in both camps.
Plus, you used to go to UBC.
I mean, a UBC graduate, and we come out every winter to go to ski, and we come out in the summers to spend time, at my dad's place and surf and cycle and sail and do all these wonderful West Coast activities. So. I'm aware of what's been going on politically out here, and follow it quite closely. Yeah. So I feel
now you're in a really tough riding. I mean, let's pull up Ross for a moment. Let's pull up the last number of years. So Vancouver Quadra, if you scroll up there, Ross, Vancouver Quadra has only ever had a Conservative and Liberal candidates that have won in this riding. There's never been an NDP or a Green. Yeah. And the last time that we had a Conservative candidate win was Bill Clark, who finished in 1984. And then you had John Turner, Ted McWhinney, Stephen Owen, who I believe, was he the mayor of Vancouver at one point? I can't remember. Yeah. And of course, you now got this incumbent, Joyce Murray, who's been in this role for better part of 10 years. Yeah. And if you go back, scroll down there, Ross, you can see the last election results. In the last one, Joyce got nearly 60% of the vote. Yep. Now, you can see the number of votes, 31,102. My wife and I were those number 31,101 and 2. We voted Liberal Party. Yep. I've never voted Liberal in my life. No. I was very inspired by Justin Trudeau.
I think a lot of people were.
Yeah. And I'm not inspired by him at all. I've gone from being one of his biggest fans to his biggest critics. So I'm that swing voter that people like you are probably trying to target, because really, if you think about the voting segments, you've got 3 segments. You've got people who are going to vote Conservative no matter what. You've got people who aren't going to vote Conservative no matter what. They're the people who are in the NDP or Green or Liberal camp. And then there's people like me who I got inspired. Never voted Liberal before. I've actually voted virtually every party you can think of. And I'm not that much of I'm not wishy-washy guy, but I'm very inspired by individuals and their personal thoughts. And so that's one of the first questions I want to dive into is, what do you bring to Vancouver Quadra that is different than Joyce Murray? What are you going to bring to the table from an incumbent like her who's been here for 10 years that's going to be better for Vancouver Quadra residents?
Well, I think, Joyce has done a admirable job. She's been there for, as you say, 10 or 12 years. Yeah. Her competition for the leadership against Trudeau didn't do her any favors amongst the Liberal caucus. Mm-hmm. And she was a backbencher for a long time. And so that didn't give her a very big voice, obviously, within the Liberal government. Most recently, she took over the role from Jane Philpotts, who stepped down in the scandal, and that is as president of the Treasury Board. So, she's had sort of a boost in her status in the last 6 months. But, should a Trudeau government get in again, it's uncertain where she will be, whether she'll be in or out of the Parliament. Yeah. Or not the Parliament, the Cabinet. The Cabinet, yeah. Yeah, and she's. When I talk to her at these debates, I mean, it's very much the party line. Joyce's agenda is always very much aligned with the Green Party. I don't think she brings to the table a strong business understanding or economic understanding that has to be strong in order to support the social programs or the green programs. She's much more aligned, I think, with a Green Party or an NDP sort of platform. And I think I can bring some fresh ideas. I think I can bring fresh energy for sure. And certainly a new perspective on how we need to support the economy in order to have our kids get good jobs in the riding, come out of university and have opportunities. Right. Rather than, being so focused on that one topic of the environment. I mean, the Conservative platform has a very strong environmental platform they've brought forward, but it marries with a strong economy. And sure. I think we need to be mindful of both rather than the Liberal approach of one at the expense of the other. Yeah. And really, after I was in, doing that introduction, my call to politics really was because I'd watched investment flee this country the last 4 years.
Well, especially in Alberta.
And in mining and resources. And, you know, I mean, my mandate is the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin, which is not specifically Alberta. It's all the way up to Fort St. John and all the way into, you know, Saskatchewan. And you know, even Manitoba. I mean, there's oil producing companies in Manitoba, and so it's really important to recognize that it's the whole Western region that has been affected by Trudeau's policies. It isn't. I mean, he has really alienated the West, and although Vancouver he seems to have a love affair with, it isn't the rest of the province that he's out protecting. So I think I can bring that balanced voice, a more of a regional perspective, get Western Canadians more aligned on stuff.
Sure.
A lot of the policies I found to be very divisive, pitting region against region and family against family. I mean, it's difficult. I've got obviously family in Calgary, family in Victoria, and family here in Vancouver.
Right.
And it's hard to get everybody together for a barbecue without
having a big fight.
Well, I mean,
over
the croquet match has become very, very vicious. You know, balls are being sent off cliffs and, you know, into the pool, and it's become very divisive for the family.
Actually. It was divisive between John Horgan and Rachel Notley. I'm sure it's not probably that much warmer with Jason Kenny. And so let's talk about this a bit more, because you've probably got, I would say just generally speaking, two types of residents in Vancouver Quadra. You have people who maybe are more business prone and maybe a little more pragmatic and think about sort of things from a national level. And maybe they're like yourself, their livelihood, or myself, their livelihood is somewhat based on the success of extraction of resources. So let's get, we got to dive into the pipeline debate. But then you've also got other people who may or may not vote for you based on, or your party based on their belief that, hey, you know what, we don't want to continue to depend on oil. We don't want oil pipeline increasing tanker traffic in English Bay. So can you address, I guess, both those groups? And maybe you can't support one and also support the other. I don't know. Is there a way in which you can kind of win the votes and hearts and minds of both those types of groups of people?
Well, I think there's certainly a middle ground that we can, we can probably capture that 60% in the middle. Yeah. There's 20% on both ends that will never be happy.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
So, with respect to, the pipelines and, I support pipelines wholeheartedly. I think they're the safest, most economic way to transport oil, gas, or refined products. And I think we need, obviously, more capacity down here. I mean, you can see that the supply-demand curve here is insane. I mean, the price of gas, I filled up my little wee car today, at $1.82, which seems ridiculous for premium. And, I think Vancouverites are tired of paying those prices, yet there's a real disconnect between, okay, well, if we have more pipeline capacity, those prices coming down. I mean, a lot of the refined products are shipped up from the U.S., which, which then we're selling our oil to the U.S. because of diminished pipeline capacity at a discount. Yeah. And then we're buying it back at a premium.
Right.
So we're really not doing ourselves any favors by blocking pipelines, be it one's Energy East, which has been totally shelved. There's actually a group looking at reviving that pipeline route and putting in a proposal, or the, Keystone XL pipeline, which runs south. I mean, bitumen that is now being produced out of the oil sands and being pipelined south to the Gulf Coast, sold into the U.S. market at a $20 discount of differentials, is now being loaded onto ships in the Gulf Coast and shipped to China at market. Wow. So Canada is walking.
So the Americans are cleaning up.
The Americans are cleaning up on our
hard work and
our resources, and so it's opportunity cost. For jobs, it's money we're losing that would support our social programs like healthcare, like education, universities, you name it. Yeah. And it's billions that we're walking away from. Yeah. So I would really like to see You know, the
What about refining product? I mean, one of the concerns that people like myself would have is about having raw bitumen being loaded on ships, which is already being done, but just being...
Raw bitumen is the same as crude oil. So it's just diluted bitumen, and it reacts the same as oil. I mean, it's become...
Okay, so either
one, changes the product.
Sure.
Yeah.
But either one, wouldn't we be better off... I'm being very philosophical here, but so maybe I don't understand the economics. So wouldn't we be way better off if we had more refining capacity at source, or we have a refinery. Parkland has a small refinery that's running always at full capacity.
Yep.
I mean, wouldn't we be better off than
refineries are expensive?
Okay,
they're multi-billion-dollar enterprises, and
but do they cost more than $4 billion?
Yeah, they're probably about 6.
Okay.
Yeah, depending on the size, obviously, and how many, and what products you expect to make from them, right?
Okay.
So having a refinery is a great idea in concept.
Yeah.
But we have proven ourselves to the global markets to be unreliable to invest in.
Okay.
So even trying to find that $6 billion to build a refinery at this point is going to be difficult with a Trudeau government.
I see.
We're going to need to repeal Bill C-69 and C-48 and let the world know that we're open for business, have a competitive tax structure with, to our neighbors in the U.S. in order to get that level playing field. Otherwise, we are just not going to attract those international dollars that we need, because Canada's too small of a country to finance those huge projects. We need that influx of international capital.
Okay.
And
Kathleen, just for the listeners who aren't familiar with those two bills, can you just elaborate on those slightly to just give them layman's terms what those bills are?
Bill C-69 is the large, they call it the pipelines bill, but it's really any large infrastructure project that they put through. And it's got, it's about 400 pages long. The Senate tried to repeal it. They tried to push through a number of amendments to it, and the Trudeau government slashed those amendments suggested by the Senate and approved it just in June.
Okay.
And it is a devastating bill for business, because it has sections that can't contradict each other. So in one section you're allowed to do this, in the next section you're not. And so if anybody takes a court challenge on it, it will spend all of its time in the courts because it isn't definitive enough. And then Bill C-48 is the West Coast tanker ban bill, which targets the North Coast anti-oil tankers. But, that's the Northwest Passage.
Yeah.
Currently, there's a lot of shipping traffic coming through there. Tankers are off coast there, coming down from Valdez in Alaska, because we can't stop their tankers coming through.
Yeah.
And it harms Alberta. It's almost like Trudeau decided it was against Alberta, because there's nothing in that bill that stops oil being shipped into St. Lawrence.
Yeah.
There's nothing that stops oil coming into the coastal refineries in New Brunswick or in Quebec. And so it's really a targeted bill at Alberta.
Okay.
And that's what it feels like. And unfortunately, most of the bans along the path of that pipeline, the pipeline route, have agreed that it would bring jobs, it would bring prosperity. But there's a couple of the bans have been paid off by foreign funded interest groups that are taking it to court, and so it's stalled it out. And I mean that concerns me as well, is the foreign funding and the interference in our infrastructure projects.
Is there evidence of that, or is that just hearsay?
Yeah, no, there is documented evidence, and Wendy Mesley actually did a big show on that and showed it on the CBC.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all from the tax returns. You have to follow the money. I mean, it's about that, right?
Yeah.
And, when small Indian bands are given donations of, 50,000 over, regularly over a series of years, it starts to become a pattern.
Yeah.
And if it's money out of the U.S., you're asking yourself, why is this?
Why is that happening?
Why is this happening? So
I believe financial accountability and transparency is so important. Because if you make that transparent, and that's one of my disappointments with the Trudeau government, is they talked about becoming more accountable and transparent, and even with freedom of information, and it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It's been terrible. Let's okay, this has been good. This is really interesting for me as someone who may vote for you. I always position myself as I'm pro pipeline, but I'm anti-oil tankers in the sense that I'm really worried. My kids and I, my family, my wife, we all live in Point Grey. We're very fortunate. We have this beautiful view of the English Bay, and we go down the beach on a regular and in the summertime. And I think the estimates are that if we doubled this pipeline, that the amount of tanker traffic would increase by like 12-fold or some number like that. I don't know, sure. But a pretty large factor.
It'll go from one tanker every 5 days to one a day.
Okay.
Which
that seems pretty big to me.
It's 7% of the tanker. Well, it's at this point it's 3% of the actual shipping traffic in and out, and it will go to 14%. Which is still minimal compared to the amount of shipping that we're seeing done by, the fertilizer companies, the container companies, and really overall, year on year, the Port of Vancouver increases its traffic by 7% every year.
Right.
So it's a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's another drop, obviously, but it, in the overall scheme of things, it's
But speaking of drops, I mean, it's a different thing to have a container I don't know if it's ever happened, a container fall in the ocean.
Containers fall in the ocean a lot more than people realize. Yeah.
Okay.
I used to do offshore sailing.
Really?
And you would talk to other sailors, and they float just inches below the surface because there's just enough water or air in them to keep them afloat.
Really?
And you can run your boat into them.
Oh my!
Out sailing, out in the middle of the sea. Yeah.
Wow.
So terrifying stuff.
Yeah. But going back to the people like me who are like, I don't want to see more oil tankers going through. I mean, do you have any? What would your response be?
Well, the oil tankers that come in and out of Burrard Inlet are the smaller variety. So, because the super tankers just can't fit. So they're between 80 and 120 megatons. So they're no bigger than the ships that you currently see anchored out there. They're all double hulled. So they're very, very safe. They're all piloted, and because of the value of the commodity that they're shipping, they are in and out very quickly. They don't sit in the harbor very long if they get to anchor at all.
Yeah.
With that.
Actually, on that point, I don't think they do anchor because a good friend of mine I play hockey with, he's actually one of these pilots.
Yeah.
And he has to get taken out past Vancouver Island. That's where they sit. They
get into the Wanda Fuca, and he gets on board and brings them in because he's got the knowledge, the local stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, I think they're way safer and way more environmentally conscious because there is such scrutiny on them than the ships that are just sitting out there right now with the rusty hulls and the container ship ones or the lumber ships or the other commodities that they're moving, and those ones don't have double hulls. Those are the ones that we see the big booms around when you're out on the beach because the diesel's coming out of the back or the bilge has had a spill. And so I think overall the scrutiny on the tankers makes them actually quite a bit safer and a lot less. If anything goes wrong, all hands are on deck, and the likelihood of that happening because of all of the procedures in place are minimal.
Okay. That's great. Great answer. Thank you. Are you aware of whether or not the Conservative Party has any plans or policy in place to kind of address people like myself who are worried about oil getting into these coastal waters from a perspective of if you form government, and you go ahead and push through this doubling of the pipeline? Do you know if the Conservative Party has anything in place?
There is already, because of the current shipping that's going on, there is a huge emergency plan in place, and companies, and actually one gentleman, president of the group that does the cleanup and the emergency response, reached out to me, and I tried to get back to him. We were trying to get a time that we could speak on the phone, and we haven't been able to at this point. But it's, there are huge resources on standby all the time should there be a mishap. But, between your friend piloting the ships and, the scrutiny that's going on, and there are no shortcuts taken. They do everything by the book. And I would feel safer with those tankers coming in and out than, the rusty ones sitting out there. Those are the ones that worry
Yeah.
me, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you
or
know,
other parts of the planet, yeah,
well,
where
exactly.
the standards aren't as high. Are those standards, Kathleen, and I don't want to carry too much on because we have other topics to talk about, but are those standards that you've talked to, are these kind of requirements that are set by like Vancouver Port Authority or something, so that like
The double hull tanker, I'm not sure who has
Yeah.
set that, but I
Yeah.
know that that is what's required in Canadian waters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just Vancouver. There's a requirement for Canadian waters,
Well,
as far as you know.
As far as I know,
Yeah.
I would hope. I mean, my focus has always been sort of on the BC side.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they are as stringent, but I would hope that they
Yeah.
are in the Gulf of St. Lawrence
Yeah.
and sort of off Nova Scotia. And,
Yeah.
you know, they have big oil platforms out there. They're producing oil out
Yeah.
there. I would assume that those same stringent requirements are required there too.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, let's jump to another hot topic that's
Okay.
always talked about out here on the West Coast, which is, especially in Vancouver, is affordability of housing and, like, you know, how people can, you know, get by. You're going to have, I mean, I pull up the map for a second, Ross, as you start to think about this for a moment, Kathleen.
Okay.
I love this map because for those of you who don't know Vancouver well, I mean, most people are going to listen to this are probably living.
That's actually an old one.
Is it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
It's
that
not
is
going to be
the-
far off, though. I mean, maybe
Arbutus
the boundaries.
Arbutus Street is now the boundary.
Arbutus the boundary now?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Vancouver Granville is now that new riding in there. So that on that
Right.
map, Vancouver Granville doesn't show up. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that, by
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah, no
we'll make
worries.
sure we update that, Ross. But what you've got in here is you've got First Nations down in Musqueam.
Yep.
You have you know, starving students out at UBC. You have very wealthy executives living in, you know, West Point Grey and Shaughnessy.
Yeah.
You've got, you know, professional millennials and web developers and whatnot living in Kitsilano. I mean, you've got probably the broadest mix you can possibly
Very
find.
diverse.
It's very diverse.
Yes. Yes.
So, so going to this, let's talk about affordability of housing. Do you have any sort of thoughts or comments? I'm assuming that you hear about this from some of your constituents.
It's certainly come up a few times at the door, and you know, I would agree. As I mean, it's expensive. It's you know, it's expensive to buy. It's expensive to rent, and really the living expenses out here are, you know, are very high. But you know, that's what comes with living in a world-class city, and that's what has happened to Vancouver. It's gone from being just one of one of Canada's most beautiful towns, to an internationally renowned city. I mean, on par with cities like New York and London and Paris, and so it's a very desirable place to live. So the costs are going to follow that. So along the lines of housing affordability. There's sort of a 4-step plan that has been put forward by the Conservatives to make housing more affordable.
Okay.
But under the Liberals, the mortgage stress test was introduced, you know, which made it more difficult for people to get a mortgage.
Yeah.
Raising mortgage insurance premium, which meant that people, you know, couldn't get their CMHC insurance on it.
I mean, basically, I know this really well. I'll just quickly interject. So just for folks that don't know, CMHC insurance coverage, first of all, when you talk about mortgages, there's generally 2 rates out there. There's rates on insured and uninsured mortgages. And the rates on uninsured mortgages, CMHC mortgages, are always lower because the banks can effectively package up all those mortgages, sell it out into the market, and so they get they'll lend that money out at a discount. But in order to qualify, the house value cannot exceed $1 million under the new rules.
Yeah,
what you're talking about right now. So it completely eliminates virtually any, you know, home, even if it's a condo. I mean, you know, in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on that point. It's a real challenge to get an insured mortgage in this riding you're in.
Yeah, and as well, they introduced punishing new taxes on the middle class.
Right.
And so they sort of compounded the problems that people were having with affordability. Right. So the Conservatives will work with the provinces and municipalities to, you know, knock down regulatory barriers, which will hopefully encourage new home construction as sort of one of, you know, create some more product on the market.
Yeah.
Make it easier to save for down payments for first-time homeowner incentives, and they did introduce that. The Liberal Party introduced that first-time homeowner incentive. It was a bit of a gimmick because if you qualified for it, you were already qualified for a mortgage with a bank.
Right.
And it made no sense because now the government owns, whatever percentage of your house. I think it was up to 20%.
Yeah.
They take none of the risk if your house devalues.
That's right.
And they then take some of the capital gains if it increases.
Yeah.
So it was really a.
And not only that, Kathleen, it was you tapped out at $525,000.
And that's not going to buy you very much here.
No. So they just recently announced that Trudeau announced, I don't know if you caught this, about 2 weeks ago, he was here in Vancouver announcing that they're increasing the threshold from $520,000 or $500,000 to $800,000, which still doesn't get you much. But my question to that is, like, did it take you 4 years to figure that out? Like, why did it take you 4 years to figure out that you can't buy a place in Vancouver for $500,000? So I agree. It's a gimmick.
It's a real gimmick.
Yeah.
So it's the Scheer's plan is to just put more money in your pocket generally.
Okay.
And lower taxes. Have some incentives, for your kids' programs, because most people have small families, and they're to help out with really all of the affordability of life.
Yeah.
And I think it's a better way forward, and I like anything that reduces red tape.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree that this province is mired in red tape, and compounded by a Liberal government on top of that, makes it very difficult to get anything done.
Yeah.
And
well, it's a great. I mean, I have to admit, it's refreshing to hear somebody say, you know what? Instead of having more programs that are just going to cost more money, why don't we just put more money in your pocket and let you decide what to do with it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and save it and invest it, and even if it's in a passive savings account, if you're a small business, the Liberals were taxing that as well.
Sure.
And so, there was no end. So at least under a Scheer government, you'll be able to save that passive tax if you're a professional corporation, to make capital investments, and whether that's an office or a home office or a new piece of machinery for your company.
Yeah, sure.
It's just a better way to do business.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Kathleen. That's great. Well, you've mentioned a couple times now a Scheer government, and one of my criticisms of the two big parties, the Conservative Party and the Liberal, both of who in my voting adult life, I voted for. Liberal once, Conservative maybe a few more times, is that both parties, in my view, and I think this is probably a reason why myself and many others didn't vote for Stephen Harper in the last election. It was almost like a protest vote, and was inspired by Justin Trudeau because he was going to do politics differently. And he's like probably worse than anybody, is this toe the party line kind of agenda. And, one of the things I'm really inspired by is Jody Wilson-Raybould. I really hope she gets reelected, because to me, I think we need to see more people coming to Ottawa who are truly independent thinkers. And my concern that I have with a party like Conservative Party or Liberal Party is that you get a bright person like yourself who, has a lot of great ideas, is going to be a phenomenal representative of the local constituents, but then you show up in Ottawa and you're told, hey, here's the playbook, this is what you're voting for, and don't go outside the lines. Can you comment on my kind of my sort of cynicism over the two big parties? And, and what would you if you were my MP?
Well, ideally, I would have free vote all the time, and but I don't. I mean, I'm not a politician. I don't have really much of an idea of how much the party whip actually whips you and requires you to toe the party line.
Yeah.
My understanding is that Conservatives do allow free votes very often, except on like the budget and stuff that really needs to get passed.
Yeah.
And those things I would likely agree with anyway.
Right. Okay.
But I think the free vote is very important, and it's important that I have a voice for Vancouver Quadra, because that's my job. My shareholders are Vancouver Quadra residents.
Right on.
And that's who I work for. That's who pays me to stand up and have their voices heard.
Yeah.
And I think Andrew, as a Speaker of the House, and being the youngest Speaker of the House, I mean, he's very adept at working collaboratively with people and coming to consensus. And I'm confident that he would allow that, within the party, getting people to agree, and hearing your concerns.
Yeah.
So I guess, it's not really an answer, but I'll
That's
do
a good
my
answer. I
I'll
think it's
do
good.
my best.
Yeah,
I'll do
okay.
my best to make sure
Yeah.
that our voices are heard.
Yeah.
Because we're a long way from Ottawa out
Yeah.
here,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's important that we do get heard, because it's like you say, it's one of the most diverse ridings. I was told it's also the highest educated riding. We have
Is
the
that right?
most post-secondary degrees as anywhere,
Yeah.
and it's in the top 5 for wealth. And I think it's important that we get heard. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of really great people and great ideas, and people that understand the topics, the variety of topics that are facing Canada a lot better than I do.
Yeah.
And if I can be their voice, then I think we'd go a long way.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go to the last question that I've asked everybody else, and go back to here we are. This is the voting results for Joyce Murray last election, 60%. Maybe we give her an extra 5 or 10 for the protest vote of Stephen Harper. But my question to you is this: what do you think it is that at the end of the day makes somebody who maybe was on the fence of voting for yourself or another party, and they walk into that ballot room box and they end up checking Joyce in the end? What do you think the reason is that we have such a high number of people year after year doing that? Like, is there any reason that you think, and do you want to comment on that?
I think a lot of Joyce's supporters are friends.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my aunt lives.
But you're
in,
talking 60%. You can't possibly have 31,000
well, I
friends.
mean, she's been around a long time,
Yeah.
and a lot of the
But 31,000 people out of like 50.
well, and I think that was skewed in the last election.
You do? Okay.
I think there was a huge number of voters that turned up at UBC and in various areas that were actually supporting the legalization of marijuana.
Right.
And I think that was a huge push, and of course, Justin Trudeau's charisma and Stephen Harper's sort of long time in office. I think it all amounted to a very, very large win for Joyce in the last. But if you go back to the previous two
you're right,
elections,
actually, if you look at
it's much closer.
Yeah, 42 versus 39.
That's
a very close race.
And I think that that's probably more akin to what we will see this time.
Yeah.
And a lot of the folks that I talked to on the doorstep are like yourself. They voted for Joyce last time, and then when we start to talk, they're like, I think, put me down.
Yeah.
I'm on side with you, Kathleen.
Yeah, great.
So, I am committed to the people, and I mean, I love it.
This
out
is
here.
a great segue into my other question, which is because I want to open. I've asked a lot of very clear, pointed questions that we've asked all the candidates, but you're out there door knocking. We've touched on pipelines, and we've touched on affordability of housing. But what else are you hearing from your constituents? What's kind of the thing that sort of, has there been a common theme that you're hearing, or something that you're going, wow, I didn't, maybe something you didn't even expect? Or
Well, they're fed up with the leadership that they see in both parties. People are not happy with the dirty politics, that they're seeing dragged out. It's U.S. style. It's very un-Canadian.
Yeah.
And, for the most part, I would agree with that. I worry about Justin Trudeau's leadership myself. I feel that he is guided mostly by the principles of his close advisor.
Gerald Butts.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
The real Prime Minister of Canada.
Yeah. And I didn't vote for Gerald.
No.
I never would vote for him. And his ethics concerned me a little bit. I mean, he was definitely part of Kathleen Wynne's Ontario wins.
Yeah.
That's not who people should be voting for.
Yeah.
People should be voting for a leader. And, you can argue, the other thing I hear at the door is people aren't inspired by Andrew Scheer.
Yeah.
And, my response to that is, so he's not flashy, he's not exciting. He drives a minivan, he watches the CFL.
Yeah.
He'd rather spend time with his 5 kids and his dog and his wife than, get on some Hollywood, show
Yeah.
and,
And
demonstrate.
show his flashy socks.
Yeah, and show
Yeah.
off his socks. So, I mean, Andrew Scheer he's stable, he's steady, and I think he can do a great job in returning respect to Canada internationally and attracting investment again and guiding us through, this climate. I'm not going to call it a crisis, but this climate sort of awareness that we're having now.
Yeah.
And the fact that we need to pull up our socks and we need to make sure that we are have our ducks in a row and that we're helping internationally, with our partners for them to have clean energy as well. Because the only way to lift people out of poverty is for them to have energy.
Sure.
And, we can't decide unilaterally that, we aren't going to send it, because they will get their energy then from other less clean and less, conscientious regimes.
Yeah.
And, that's no good either.
Yeah.
So, I mean, exporting clean Canadian energy is really the best solution for the globe.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay,
So-
good. I've got one more that I can think of, and maybe we'll wrap it up unless you've got something else. How are we doing for time here, Ross?
43 minutes.
Yeah, okay, great. And it comes back to, and this should be easy for you because you're a businesswoman, is the finances of our country. We've been this Trudeau government seems to be unabated in their spending habits. Like it just drives me nuts. I mean, I kind of view that if you don't have the money, don't spend it. That's kind of the way I was raised, and that's the way I think that government should often run.
Yeah.
We send billions of dollars of foreign aid overseas to unaccountable, hostile regimes. I mean, just today I read that Andrew Scheer, maybe it was yesterday, announced that he would cut back on that foreign aid, especially to hostile regimes.
That was this morning. Yeah, that was the announcement this morning. Yeah.
And which I'm a huge supporter of. But we look like these deficits just seem to never end with the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to want to spend money. I mean, even the Conservative Party is saying it's going to take them quite a while before they turn the books around to become, cash flow positive, if you want to call it. Can you comment on, finances and being, the businesswoman that you are and all your background of being a CEO of a company? Like, what are your views on this?
Well, I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. I cannot sit idly by and watch Trudeau run up the deficit the way he has. That's going to take 40 years to balance a budget.
Yeah.
If we have 4 more years of Justin Trudeau, our kids and our kids' kids will never see a balanced budget.
Right.
He is spending out of control, which, he's a guy that has never had to balance his home budget. I mean, he's always had a trust fund.
Yeah.
So it's just never occurred to him that's something people need to do. I mean, I was a single parent with 2 kids.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what was going out and coming in.
Yeah.
And some months you run a deficit into your line of credit.
Yeah.
But you rein it in and you pay it down.
Definitely.
And you keep it balanced.
Yeah.
Because you can't continue like that. So I'm very concerned if he gets back in and the billions that he's promised, and even the deficit as it sits. We're paying $27 billion a year in interest payments.
It's over $1 billion a month now. It's unbelievable.
It's maddening.
And we're at low interest rates.
Yes. No.
Guess what happens when rates go up, folks?
Yeah.
If we see rates go up we're at I call 2% borrowing costs, somewhere in that range for the federal government, maybe a little bit less. But you get inflation kicks in, and all of a sudden that's doubled. Now it's not $27 million a year; it's 52.
Yes.
And
yes, and that will start to impact our social programs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we don't rein it in now.
People don't get that, Kathleen. Let's say I'm worried that the voters who show up to vote on that voting day on October 21st don't realize that this unabated spending, this unchecked spending,
that you have to pay the piper.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you. I think people see government
how do you translate that as an unseasoned politician? How do you deliver that message so that people can understand that this money that your government is spending will come back to pay either you're paying it for it or your kids or your grandkids?
Well, I try to even get them to recognize that it's actually their money. That's
Right,
your
exactly.
money they're wasting. And I mean, I recognize it, and it infuriates me.
Yeah.
But it's a very difficult concept because governments, have always kind of run run deficits.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a big Chrétien Martin fan.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked,
so was I.
and I liked how they were fiscally responsible and got the house in order. And Stephen Harper.
Party.
Yeah, well, and Stephen Harper, kind of maintained that.
Yeah.
And it's that very centrist social agenda with a fiscally conservative approach to things.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to return to. I mean, we just can't afford it, and it does scare me.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to explain to people.
Yeah, it is. Do you feel, and I should make a point that a lot of liberals love to criticize that Stephen Harper also ran some deficits, but he also ran those deficits during and right after the global financial crisis.
Yes, yeah.
Like that's the other thing that blows
It was in the recession.
Exactly. Like the other thing I think that I always say to my friend, anybody who wants to support this sort of liberal spend agenda is I'm like, our economy, we have like all-time unemployment, low unemployment, so people are well employed. The stock market's hitting all new highs, and this isn't just because of Trudeau, because it's happening in the States too. And you've got the Trump government down there, and they're about the exact opposite of Trudeau. So I think it's beyond just government. But what happens when we have a downturn? If we can't have a balanced budget when the economy is probably the best it's ever been, what is this government going to do when, excuse my French, when shit starts hitting the fan?
Yes. I'm absolutely on the same page.
So now I'm selling to you. Maybe you should vote for me, but but Kathleen. So in your view, from your sort of observation, how strong is this sheer conservative government when it comes to the books, when it comes to finances? Do you have strong people there that are going to be able to step in and do a better job than Bill Morneau?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've met a number of the candidates stepping up. And, we've looked across the country. We have our candidate phone calls.
Yeah.
And we've got some very, very educated people that have stepped up. I think, like myself, people that are just fed up with Trudeau. A lot, some first-timers. We've got, some wonderful veterans in the crowd. I mean, I'm a big Michelle Rempel fan.
Yeah.
And so we've got, I think, a team that we can pull together that will bring about that fiscal restraint without compromising the social programs that people are so desperately need because they've become reliant on them. And it's a fact of life that our medical system costs X billion a year, and those transfer payments have to go through. And so the Scheer government has guaranteed that healthcare spending will not decrease. It'll go up by 3% per year, as will the social programs. So he's guaranteed those things in the budget, but the rest of it, I think, he's going to be looking for wiggle room. Looking for wiggle room. And, I think his announcement today, as you mentioned, on the foreign policy is a great step forward. We shouldn't be sending foreign aid to those kind of places. They don't need Canadian money. I think he's on the right track, and he's got a really smart team backing him up. Okay. So
good.
I feel that
hopefully you'll be one of them.
I'm hoping that I can be part of that team and make some change. So I hope that you can support me on October 21st.
Yeah. Good. Well, on that, let's talk about your social media presence, how people get involved. You got a website.
Do I?
Right. So what have we got here?
I have a social media person, and he's running stuff by me, but I really don't. I don't have time to be.
But if people want to get involved and help you out,
if people want to get involved, please go to KathleenDixon.ca, and that's our website. Okay. And the campaign office.
And just to make sure we get the spelling for people who are listening and not watching.
KathleenDixon.ca. And you can contact our campaign office there.
Yeah.
We also have somewhere that you can donate.
Okay.
And we're always looking for donations.
Yeah.
And
do you need volunteers at all?
Volunteers are more than welcome, especially young ones that move quickly. Because I've door knocked about 3,000 houses now, and I have an old skier's knee. So I'm not as quick as I could be, but I'm happy to carry. I mean, I'll carry on, obviously. Yeah. But if I can get a young person to run up and ring someone's door.
Well, you biked all the way down here.
Well,
I
do.
Yeah.
I love cycling. So mountain biking, road biking, or fat biking, I'm in.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
Do you have an e-bike?
No.
No?
Sacrilege. Yeah. No, I pedal power.
Yeah. Good for you. Good.
So.
Okay. Well, there's the website. What's that say there, Ross? And what is that? VQ. What is that?
Oh, VQCA.
That's the really easy website there. VQCA, which we
So that's Vancouver Quadra Conservative Association.
Conservative Association.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, Kathleen, this has been great having you here.
Yeah. Very
Best
nice.
of luck with your. We're
Thank
only
you so
20
much.
days away.
20 days away. That's
I
a
know.
scary thought.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
I got to be outdoor knocking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you get back to it.
Okay.
Thanks for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure.
And we'll see how things go on 21st of October.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the most important thing is that people get out there and vote, because then you have no reason to complain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you,
Okay.
Kathleen Dixon.
Well, my
Appreciate it.
pleasure. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.